Now, let's dive deep into this big LGBTQ story for today. I'm Alex Morash, and let's clear up the worldview. Did J.K. Rowling win Britain's Supreme Court defines a woman as biological at birth? The UK Supreme Court has made a major ruling under the Equality Act of 2010. The term woman now legally refers only to a biological female. That's the takeaway from an 88-page judgment handed down yesterday following a 2-day hearing last year. Supreme Court Judge Lord Hodge stated, quote, "The unanimous decision of this court is that the terms woman and sex in the Equality Act 2010 refer to a biological woman and biological sex," end quote. The case was brought by For Women Scotland, a trans-exclusionary radical group reportedly supported by author J.K. Rowling, a fellow TERF, and challenged an earlier ruling that said sex wasn't limited to biology. The central question: does a trans woman with a gender recognition certificate count as a woman under UK equality law? The court answered no. Judges ruled that while trans people are still protected under the category of gender reassignment, the sex category is strictly biological. In other words, the legal rights and spaces reserved for women, like hospital wards, sports, and crisis shelters, can now be based on biological sex, not legal gender. Activists say this will dramatically affect pronoun arguments and other alternative phrases like they, them for recognition. They also suggest this will lead to basis decisions arguments over who can participate in sports. Lodge Hodge emphasized the decision isn't meant to be a triumph of one group over another, and that trans people still retain protection from discrimination. Still, the ruling has left many LGBTQ advocates in the UK and abroad deeply concerned. Critics say this could erode hard-fought rights and access to safe spaces for trans people, especially trans women. So there's a couple things going on here. First, let's just get the J.K. Rowling elephant out of the way. You know, it is very disturbing that UK's views and discussions on trans people have changed based on one billionaire. Because let's remember, we did not see the sort of transphobia happening in the United Kingdom and ideas like this being an acceptable ruling before J.K. Rowling really started using her power, her wealth, her influence in the United Kingdom. And it's quite horrifying to see one rich person be able to affect policy like that. In America, we're unfortunately rather used to it. On the UK, I cannot understand their legal system to save my life. But the idea of do they even define what a biological woman is? How are they going to define that now?
I mean, at this point, as someone who actually understands a little bit about the UK system, the Parliament can easily, the House of Commons can easily pass an amendment to the Equality Act and say that sex now includes trans men and trans women according to the sex assigned to them and their gender reassignment certificates. It's a one-line thing. And remember that Britain doesn't have a constitution. It's just the constitution is basically the entire body of law of the United Kingdom, and they take some out and put some back in, according to who was running the show at the time. But more alarming right now is that's not just one billionaire woman. And also there's more, because, I mean, really, J.K. Rowling kind of triggered the wave of transphobia that swept the United States as well. I mean, she amplified the voices of Lips of TikTok. She probably red-pilled Elon himself. All these vicious hatred towards trans people and all these fake moral panics about, oh, a man is going to wear a dress and go in the bathroom. These never materialize. I mean, every day I see pastors arrested for sex crimes. Have we heard of a drag queen or a trans person, arrested lately? I don't remember any of it.
But I think you're allowing for more hate if you're a trans woman, mm-hmm. and you go into a men's bathroom because you're biologically built that way. There's going to be more trouble when the men are in the room and they've got their woman in their room, and they're just calling for trouble by forcing people into situations, whether it be in jails or crisis centers, where they're put into a group of people where they literally don't fit in because they have trans. what would be the right word, but they're now transgender. And we're putting them at risk. And I think J.K. Rowling's influence, we're giving her too much credit. This has been a problem in this last round of elections over the last decade, as we've been heading to more and more conservative areas, as we were gaining, at the same time, the conservatives were gaining more power and trying to undo some of these things. And, to say J.K. Rowling's had a heavier thumb on it, absolutely. But is she the reason? No, I mean, too much credit to her.
In the United Kingdom, I would greatly disagree, especially with the Labour Party winning this last election. She's changed the conversation in England in a way that I haven't seen many people be able to do on something. Before she was involved, we didn't really hear the whole supporting trans people means you hate women. That's sort of been her stick. And she's relentlessly done that. She's obsessed about this topic. And I think that's why she's been able to influence it more than other billionaires have done on other topics. But sorry.
Well, no, I was going to say, I kind of agree with Glenn. She might have pushed the domino, but I think the UK, and we're seeing it in other countries, they're watching the United States, and they said, oh, big boy, now the United States has spoken their venom, so now we can do that. So I think while JK is still stirring the pot, she's helping, I think the other countries are seeing us, the American government, with all of our hate and all of our trans laws being passed and everything. And so they're going, okay, now we can do it. And
it's taken a decade, because you think about it, when Trump came into power the first time and he really, brought this up to the top, that was almost a decade ago. And now, we're going to when he's done, if he finishes a second term and leaves, we'll be 12 years into him and anything that he'd done prior to that. So we're looking at a decade and a half of this messaging going out to the world.
Agreed.
So I agree with you.
Yep, and one of the things, just following up on what you were mentioning, Alex, about the UK elections, obviously we saw Labour have a big win, but if you take a look actually at the percentage of the vote, it actually doesn't equate, because I think that it was the largest Labour majority won by the smallest margin. So ultimately what you were looking at is a lot of votes siphoned off from the Conservative Party, where there was a break in this kind of national populism that's taken over Britain with the Reform Party. You remember the name Nigel Farage from Brexit. So ultimately you're looking at this rise of right-wing populism that is ultimately leading to this.
I hear you all. It's just England has its own very weird, unique, trans, radical, exclusionary feminists that have been around for a while, and they've just sort of, J.K. Rowling has sort of like helped them really propel in a way that's a little different. Like America, our craze is a little different than UK's craze, is what I'm saying.
but I think hate in general has found a voice since Donald Trump's first sense of office. We did not see the amount of hate rhetoric rise until he became powerful.
He gave permission.
He gave permission.
To be able to hate.
And then while he was out of office, he still was on his pulpit, which just kept keeping that stream of hate. And people are like, it's okay now. So I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I'm not saying that she's not part of this. I think we're giving her too much credit. And I think this news story should be more about this law and less about her, because we're giving her too much airtime. And
She jumped on the bandwagon.
Correct. And the fact that this law just doesn't affect trans women, it affects trans men. I mean, can you imagine a trans man now having to go into a female bathroom and all the women running out going, there's a man in my bathroom? Let's talk about prisons. And this law really affects the quality of life of everybody, not just the trans people, but the people around them too, because now it's putting them at risk because they have to now be careful. It's just...
And you can't pretend they don't exist. And that's kind of what they're trying to do by saying you choose men or women. There's another group of people that are trans that are there. And you can say that they don't exist, but they do. And so you have to deal with it one way or the other. And again, I think we talked about this on another show. The percentage of trans people is so minuscule compared to the overall population that the chances in a secondary city of finding a trans person is probably close to nil. Because if you want to feel comfortable and be your authentic self, you're moving to larger cities. You know, you're not staying in Des Moines, Idaho, or, Des Moines, Idaho, or something like that. You're going to a bigger city.
And, the thing is, this is not just about erasure. This is about harm multiplication. This is deliberate to want to bring trans people harm. They cheer when a trans person get murdered. They cheer when a trans person get beaten up on the streets. They have, this is not just legal harm. This is literally physical harm.
Yeah, they cheer. They don't normally cheer publicly. They try to change the subject. Like people, like whether we're talking about J.K. Rowling or if we're talking about some of the right wingers here that have been obsessed with bathrooms, they try to have discussions about sports, bathrooms, and biology, which they tend to never want to give very good answers on, to get us to not talk about the actual experience of trans people.
They probably are the same people who, got their parents' notes not to open the frog in biology in middle school. So they wouldn't know, a biological or a non-biological, or if they.
And look at Florida. Not to belabor this, but in Florida, don't say gay means you don't exist. If you can't say it, your group disappears.
Right.
And that's sort of the same thing with the trans right now, with the trans movement or anti-trans movement. You don't exist.
And because they're the smallest population, they're easy to punch down.
Exactly.
And so they're using this to be diversionary towards other things. But
it's a launching point for other hate.
Don't look at the price of eggs. Here, there's a trans person you can hate. Don't look at the price of gasoline. Don't look at these tariffs. Don't think that, don't look at the pricing label on Walmart shelves that's suddenly gone up 50%. No, look at that trans person and
because it's their fault.
What the mythical creature is trying to do to you. I mean, anyways, that is a big LGBTQ story for today. There's no other queer non-profit media platform like this in the entire world. Support our LGBTQ stories by subscribing and sharing Queer News Tonight.